Hello, my name is Ben Chapman, and today we're going to be using Substance Designer to create a Gridbox material that we can then bring into Unreal 5 using the Substance plugin. Now, the goal here is to get kind of a little bit of experience exposing parameters and creating a material in Substance Designer that we can then use in our games. And for this, I decided to use a Gridbox material because typically, you get Gridbox materials as a pack, and then you have to either edit them or create your own in something like Adobe. So by using Substance Designer, I can create a base material that I can create instances of and then affect changes by changing the parameters that I set within Substance. So for example, looking at this particular map, the platform, the ramp, the floor, the block, etc., is all based off of instances of the same material. And that allows me to change all sorts of different things, the colors, the words, etc., by just, doing that within Unreal. So that saves us a lot of time and gives us more time to, work on actually prototyping our levels rather than, creating textures to prototype our levels. So by the end of this tutorial, you should end up with your own version of this material that you can reuse throughout your prototyping. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here we are in Substance Designer. For those of you that are relatively new to Substance, this should be pretty easy to follow along. I'm going to go through everything step by step. So to get started, the first thing we want to do is create a new Substance graph. And we're going to have some templates to choose from here. In our case, we're going to pick metallic roughness. That's going to give us everything that we need and a little bit extra. So we'll get rid of some of that for efficiency. To give it a name, I'm going to call mine Gridbox, and I would leave my parent size at 512 by 512. We don't need a terribly large texture set for this, so this should work out just fine. All right, now here we are, and we have basically everything we would need to export this out and get this into Unreal as a material. Now, it's not terribly exciting. It's just a flat gray material, and it's not really doing anything for us. So we're going to be changing that as we go. We do have some extra stuff that we don't really need for what we're doing. So we don't really need a normal, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. We don't necessarily need a metallic. I don't want to make my grid box metal or not metal, so I can get rid of that. I don't need ambient occlusion, and Unreal generally doesn't use height maps, so I can get rid of that as well. So then that's only going to leave us with the two pieces that we wanted, which is going to be our base color, which is the coloring of the texture itself, and then its roughness, which is how shiny it is. So from here, what we can do is we want to make this roughness. I want to be able to change the roughness within the editor in Unreal. So in order to do that, I need to expose this uniform color as a parameter. So from there, I can click on the uniform color, and then each node has a series of parameters within it that I can expose. So what I can do is I go over to the parameter that I'm looking for. In this case, it's output color. And I go to this little kind of fiddly box here in the corner, and then expose as new graph input. Now that's going to give me a pop-up that's going to let me put some information in here. So if you've never seen this before, the identifier is the inside unique identifier that the system is going to use to tell what this parameter is. Now its label is going to be the forward-facing text that our users are going to see. So this is what we're going to have in here as far as what the users are going to see in their handle. Now the group, if you have a bunch of parameters and you want to group them together, that's where you're going to set this up. You put something in here, and then it'll be available through a drop-down after you create the first one. Now its description is nice if you want to leave information for other users here within Substance, but as far as I can tell, it doesn't actually show up in the with the Unreal plugin. So we're going to just kind of leave this all default for now, and you're welcome to go back and change that later. So the first one, like I said, we're doing roughness. So we're going to go ahead and name this. I'm going to call it roughness. And then I'm also going to go ahead and the forward facing can be the same. So roughness and roughness. And then I'm going to set its default value at 0.8. So if you haven't messed with roughness before, roughness It starts at 0, and that's your really shiny, and it goes to 1, which is really dull. I like a 0.8. That's where I'm happy, but you're welcome to change it at any time. And we are exposing this parameter, so as you use it, you'll be able to change this on the fly as well. So I click OK, and now that's available. See how it's turned blue over here? That means this is now a parameter. We can use this again in other nodes as well if we want to use that same value. Now, if you want to get at it again after you've set it up, what you want to do is you click your material or your graph here, and then it's going to show it here in the input parameters. So you see here is this roughness and it's that float, and it gives you all of that information here. So you can edit and change this at any time. Okay, so roughness is taken care of, and now for the base color. So we don't want this uniform color. We're going to actually add some stuff and make it an actual Gridbox material. So I get rid of that, and then I'm going to go over here and get started. The first thing we're going to add is a shape node. So if you go to your library and you search for shape node, you're going to be able to pop that up. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Substance, shape node is kind of where you start with an awful lot of everything. So you will get to love this one. Okay, one of its options is scale. So we're going to go ahead and mess with that and see how that makes this box bigger and larger. In our case, I'm going to want that about 0.99. So it's a nice thin line on the outside. And we're creating a mask for our colors. So if we're making a mask, white is going to show up and black is not. So this is actually reverse of what we want. So we're going to go ahead and invert it. Invert grayscale. Okay, and then that gives us our line. Now we still need a grid in between, and we can accomplish that with a tile generator. So go tile, and we've got a grayscale tile generator, and then we dump the output of this into the input of the generator. Now, once we've done that, we go over to the generator itself, and we change its input from square to image input, and that's going to give us our grid. Now, I want to change the X and Y amount of the grid, and then I also want to expose it. So I'm going to set it to 4 and 4 for my defaults, and then I'm going to expose each of those. And it's very similar to what we've already done. So I'm going to say grid X, and then for the labeling, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And I've already set it, so its default is ready. And then I'm going to do the same thing again for the Y. Now that we've done that, we're going to be able to reuse these parameters as well to affect other nodes as we go. Now we have our grid, and we have our exterior line to the grid right here, but we want to put them together, so we're going to add a blend node. Add one to the background, one to the foreground. Doesn't really matter which. And we're going to change our blend mode to add or linear dodge. Now that's going to give us basically our grid, everything we needed for that. And we'll come back to this as we add color. So now that we've done that, we need the checkerboard pattern that goes with the grid. So an easy way to do that is we've already messed with this tile generator. It's already set to have these parameters exposed and then use those parameters for the X and Y. So I can just copy it, and then I can paste it. And huzzah. Okay, and then when I go from that tile generator and change it back to square, and then go down to color and click checker mask. So now I have a mask. Now the only problem with this mask is I don't have a space for the grid itself. So what I can do is I can take my grid and invert that one more time. And then I can use that as a mask for my tile generator as I blend it. So I hit node, blend, and then we're going to move this down here. That to the foreground. Now you can't really see what's going on from a distance, but if I scroll, I circle in here on my 2D, you can see there's now a space for that grid to appear. Now I'm going to want to do that one more time. Actually, I'm going to move this over here so I have a little bit more space for what I'm doing. So I'm going to copy this one more time. And then I'm going to do the same thing again with the blend node. And then I'm going to click this one's tile generator, and it does have an invert within it, so I can just click this and it'll invert the mask. And then, whoop, I had that backwards. There we go. So now you'll see you have an opposite checkerboard pattern between the two. So then that'll give us the checkerboard pattern that we need for our color and leave space for the grid to show up. Now you could put these together. One of these is the background, one not, but then you're not going to have a space for the grid. So I want to keep that available. So what we need now is we need a color for our actual base color there. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a color. It doesn't matter what color you pick, as long as you're happy with it. I'm going to pick kind of a bluey color. It's kind of where I want to start. And then now I have my base color for that. Now I'm going to want to expose this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click here and expose the color. That's my base color. Okay, now that's available. And then from here, I want a darker version of this for the darker checkers. So what I can do is I can go over here and click HLS. Now this is going to take the color from the uniform color here, and it's going to allow me to change its hue, saturation, and lightness. Now I don't really want to play with the hue and saturation for this one, but I do want the lightness. So I can make it a bit darker or a bit lighter. And that kind of gives me a handle that I can use as a contrast between the two different checkers. So then I expose that as well. And then give it a name. I'm going with grid contrast, but you're welcome to name it anything that makes more sense to you. And then hit OK, and now that's available as well. Now I can take these two and use them as masks for these two colors. So I get two blend nodes. One blend node here. Here's its opacity. So it's foreground to this color. And then I'm going to use another node here. Same thing. Whoop, that's not where it goes. There you go. And then now I have my two colors, and I can blend those together as well. So now what you have is you have a checkerboard pattern with a space for the grid to appear. So that is ready to go. Now we can bring the grid over. So we're going to add another uniform color. And I want, like a light color for that material, for that item. Okay, so kind of a whitey color. And then I'm going to add a blend node for that. Use the grid as its opacity. And then add that to the foreground. And that should, yep, gives me what I'm looking for. And then I can bring this over here. A bit messy. We can always clean this up, move things around to make them nicer as you would like. Blend. And huzzah! So now you can see we have the grid checkerboard and the grid color. I can't remember, did I expose this? I did not. So we're going to go ahead and expose this color as well. All right, and that's going to be grid color. And then now that's available as well. Now if we didn't want to do anything else, we could drop this from here into the output node. And then you'll see in the 3D renderer, this is what we're working with now. Now I want to put in here some information. So I want to put my company name down here in the bottom right. And then I want to put the instance name and then the size of the texture or the size of the application that's going to be. In this case, it'll be like it'll start as a default, but 1 by 1 meter. So that's the next thing we need to do. Before we do that, I want to make this a little bit separated out. So I'm going to add a frame, just to make sure that we know what's what. And then now, there you go. There's my frame for that. So you can separate it out from the text. Now for the text, it's going to be a little different. So we're going to use a blend node off of that. That's going to give us a background. And we're going to use that as the background for our text. And we're going to kind of work backwards because we want to use this background to be able to see where we're placing the words and how they're set up. So what we need here is we need a blend node for that. And then we're going to use another uniform color. And what we can do is so that way we don't have to have a pin running all the way from here or down to there, getting really ugly and messy. We've already set this as an exposed parameter, so we can click here and use the grid color to get us that white color, and it'll automatically change with the exposed parameter. So then we add another blend node, and we add this to the color. We drag this out into the foreground here. Oh, hello. Oh yeah, that's right. I got this all covered up. All right, so then that gives me everything I needed for that. And then we can add a text node, which is going to drag it off in a weird place, but that's okay. We can work with that. And for its output, we're going to set that to the opacity here. And then change its output mode to grayscale, so then it will, work the way it's supposed to. Now, if we click here, we'll be able to see our text. So in this case, I'm going to start with instance. Okay. And that's going to give us what we're looking for. Now, it's, obviously it's too big, so I'm going to make it, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do its alignment. I would suggest doing alignment first, because if you forget to do alignment, you're going to have to move it twice. So then once I get it aligned, I want it left aligned, so when the text goes in, it's where I want it. I can use its position here to move it in roughly where I want it. I want it up in this corner here. And a lot of this is, personal choice and what you want it to be. So there's really no wrong answer here. You can add more information, less information, whatever makes you happy. So, okay. So go ahead and leave that. I may do some additional fiddling with it, but that should work. All right. And then I'm going to add another text button or text node. And the nice thing about the text nodes, they have a background and an output already, so you just kind of link them together. And then I can click this again to see, what I'm spitting out on the other end. And I can add its size here, this 1 by 1 meter. All right. And then it's the same thing. I want this left aligned. I'm going to adjust the size, make it a little bit smaller than the other text, and then kind of put it roughly in place. Now I'd like a dividing line between the two of these, so I'm going to go ahead and do that next. For that, I want a shape again. We're not going to do anything too fancy. It's only going to be using a couple of pixels. So we want a shape node, and then we want to be able to move it around. So we're going to give it a 2D transform, which will allow us to do that. And then we're going to put that into the background of the text node, and then we can change the shape. So for this, we're going to make the Y super small. So I'm going to do 0.005. Now you can't up and down it. It does it doesn't do it in thousandths increments. So you got to just kind of like put that in yourself, and that's fine. And then I'm going to make it a little smaller on the X. And then I can use the 2D transform to put it where I want it. So I'm going to move it roughly right here, so it's kind of in the middle between these two. And then I'm going to adjust its size on the X to try to get it about where I want it. But it might take a little bit to get it where you want it, where you're really happy with it, and that's fine. This I want maybe 0.425 maybe? Yeah, it doesn't look half bad. All right, so now that's available. Now let's see what this looks on the other end. Okay, so the line's still a bit long. So okay, we'll go ahead and scale that down some more. That right about where I want it. Yeah, that looks okay. Maybe I'll give it a little bit more down there. Okay, yeah, I can be happy with that. Okay, so now it says instance, 1 by 1 meter. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to add my text for my company name. Now what I can do is I can, add blend nodes and so on and so forth, but what would probably be a smarter play is to take this and add another text node into here. Take my line, put it in there, and then it just kind of fits right along with everything else. All right, and then here we go. We're gonna go ahead and do this company name. Okay. And change its font size. Now this will really largely depend on what you're using for your company name, like how many characters you're using, whether it's going to fit where you want it. If you're trying to get it to fit within that small checker there. Okay. Now for this one, I want it right aligned because I want it to come off of that right corner. Kind of get it where I want it. Adjust its size. I know it looks terribly small, and it will be a bit small. You can make it larger if you'd like. Well, it's like I said, again, it's really personal preference what you're trying to do with that. I'm just gonna move that. Let's say right there. So there you go. And if you want, you can change the. I'm gonna change this to bold italic. I think. Yeah, I like that. And then I think I'm gonna do the same thing for the instance name. I want that to be bold italic. Bold italic. Huzzah. So that make it a little easier to see. Although that does change its scale a little bit. So what if we bump it down just one? There we go. Okay, so that gives us our text just sitting there doing the thing. Now we do want to expose this text as a parameters, so that way we can change them within the editor. So we do the same thing over and over again. We go over here to text, expose new output graph, and this was company name. So I do company name, and I hit OK. And then that is exposed. The next one is our size text. So we're going to go ahead and expose that. All right, and then the last one is the instance name. Okay. And then we can take its final output, drag that into the output over here, and then that gives us our texture. Now, I'm just for thoroughness, I'm going to go ahead and add this to a frame. I'll call it text, so that way I can see where the grid starts and the text stops. And then that's everything. I mean, that will get you what you're looking for on the other end, other than tweaking, moving things around, making any subtle changes that you'd like to make. I believe we have all of our parameters exposed. So from here, what we want to do is we want to save the package. If you haven't already done so, save. And then for me, I'm going to go to my tutorials, Gridbox tutorial. So Gridbox SBS. So SBS is the file that Substance Designer uses for Substance Designer itself. You can't do anything with it outside of Substance Designer, but it is the base. All right, from there, now we can publish. So this button right here is publish. The first time you publish, you're going to use this button, and you want to have the SBS selected, and you click Publish SBSAR. Now that file is what's going to be used by outside of Substance Designer. So Substance Painter, Unreal, Unity, whatever it is that you're dropping it into, that's what it's going to actually pull. That's the material itself. So for this, I can just hit publish. I don't need to make any changes. Actually, I want to make sure, yep, my tutorials, Gridbox. All right, so publish that out. So now I have Gridbox, and it is ready to go. Now, once you've done this, if you need to come back and make any changes, one of the nice things is you can hit this button right here, and that will republish the SBSAR, and that will just automatically update the changes, so you don't have to do any extra stuff. You just kind of hit the button and it's going to do it for you, which is going to be something that's going to make it really easy for iterating changes if you want to make any changes to the actual material and substance. For this particular um, job, you may not need to do that, but if you want to, it's very fast to iterate changes, and that's what makes this really interesting. Okay, so from here, we're going to go back over to Unreal, and we're going to get the plugin loaded in, and we are going to bring this into the game. Okay, so we're going to need the Substance 3D plugin for Unreal. So it's pretty easy to find it and install it. You just go to their marketplace, type in Substance, and one of your options that can pull up is Substance 3D for Unreal. And go ahead and you click Install to Engine, and that will put it into your engine and make it available for you. The next thing you're going to do is go ahead and create yourself a game. I'll walk through that as well. All right, games. I'm gonna pick a third person. Just leave it in I'm gonna leave it in Blueprint because I don't need to do much more with it. Test grid. Now it's mad at me because I need to update my drivers. You probably won't see that error. If you do, it's pretty easy to fix. All right. So now that we've got this loaded up, we need to enable the plugins. So you go to Edit, go to your plugins, and same thing, Substance in UE5. And then you enable it, and then it'll have to restart. And then we are ready to go. So you can create yourself a folder for your materials. All right. And then we can bring in that SBSAR. So I have my SBSAR, and I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop it where I want it. And then it's going to give me a kind of a unique import setup here. So it's going to build basically two major portions of it. It's got its instance and then the material itself. So for the first one, I'm going to name this Gridbox base. Just that way I know that was the first one I brought in, and it'll, parent the rest of them. One of the other nice new features with the new Substance plugin is I can choose over here what template I want to use. So in this case, I'm going to use a triplanar template because a lot of the stuff we have doesn't have UVs, and it opens up a new option that is really nice. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to click Import, and then it drags it right in. Now from there, I'm going to do a couple little quick tweaks, and then we'll drop it into our game level. Okay, so if I go to the material itself, one of the options I get with the triplanar projection is I can set the offset, move it around and such. And the one I really want to play with right now is I want this use physical size. Now the use physical size will then kind of fix up that projection. So when I apply it, it will look nice. So then I can just drag and drop it onto something, and there you go. And then it should be good to go. Yeah, put it on pretty much anything there. And then, oh, nah, it did the. So sometimes I noticed if I click this and then click it back on, it'll fix that, and then it'll properly set up the way I want it to. I don't know if that's a bug or it just needs to update along. So now for each instance we've created, or that we create, we're going to have a set of options for it. So it's a little fiddly when you're setting it up. You want to make sure that you've got your naming the way you want it to be. So that way you can tell which instance is which. So now all of those parameters we exposed are going to be here in this instance for whichever material. Now I'm going to make this smaller so that way I can look at it at the same time. All right. And then you'll see here are all of the parameters that we exposed. So what you can do here, so say I want to change the color, I can change the color. You see how fast that updates, just kind of almost in real time, right? And I hit now, hit OK. There's that. So I change it to kind of that purpley color. Maybe I want it, a green color. And then I've got, where is the contrast? So I've got the contrast, so I can kind of adjust, how I want that contrast to be. I can adjust my roughness. So say I want to make it more shiny, I can make it more shiny. I can make it less shiny. And then I can also change these grid amounts. So say I just wanted a 2x2. I can make it that way. I can make it more grids, less grids. It's really kind of up to you, whatever you want to do at that point. And then one of the other things I can do is I can change the company name. So I can say Plate Loomer Games. Put that in there. And see, that just tags right in the way I want it. And then the instance, so say, this is a wall, right? So wall. And then that should change. Did we not expose that? I feel like maybe we didn't expose that. All right, so hit save. Why did that not? Oh, I think we exposed the wrong. Oh, that's because I did company name. My bad. So late games. Okay. So instance name, wall. There we go. So, and then also I can, change the 1x1 meter if I wanted to. And at this point, you can do anything you want with that. So I save that, close that down. So now I've got, that's one instance of that. That's like, a wall. So say I wanted to do like, the floor. I want to do the floor differently. What I can do is I can go over here to this substance instance factory, and I right click on that, and I create a new instance. So I create a new instance. It's going to do the same thing it did before. It's going to load that import settings. So I'm going to want to go in here and change the names. So I'm going to do this as floor. And however you name it is totally up to you, as long as you can make sure you differentiate which one is which one's the material, which one's the instance. So, and I'm going to do my triplanar projection again. I hit import. All right, so then I've got my floor. I'm going to go back in here, do the same thing I did before, use physical size. Save. Okay, and then I'm going to put the floor on the floor. And then now I can see it. I can open up the instance information. And I can change this around a bit. So, say I want to go with like a gray color. Okay. And then change this to floor. If you're using for your application, it might make sense to, set the default to whatever your company name is, because then it'll just, automatically apply. So then I've got that set up. Now, say, I don't like the way this is laid out, right? Like the floor is all, it's not in the direction I want it to go in. Okay, so I can go back to that material here. I'll make this smaller so I can see it as I'm updating the changes. Now I've got two things. I've got a rotation and I've got a position offset. So I can go to my rotation, and I want to rotate this on the z-axis. So then I can give this a, let's see here, -90, I think. And then, huzzah. That is now saved, and it's rotated the way I want it to do. So that's pretty handy when you're setting these up for different applications. You can move it around. You can jockey it the way you want it and set it up. And you can make as many instances as you want, and it's going to work out pretty good for you. Now, one thing to to kind of note for like efficiency and whatnots is one thing you could have done is instead of having the roughness like we did here, we could set that up as just an individual texture. Say you knew exactly what you wanted for your roughness, and then you could go into the actual material and you could select what you want for that roughness. So like you could save, like a couple of different textures and make them very small, like say a couple of pixels or even 1 pixel by 1 pixel because it's a single value all the way across, and then just use that instead of doing this because each time we make an instance we're picking up another texture. So like in this case, that's another 1024 by 1024. Now when it outputs it would be a bit different, but that's something to be aware of if you're trying to save some extra space. Although this is not a production texture, you wouldn't really export this out as an actual game asset, so it might be less of a concern. And there you go. Now you have it. So I can hit play if we want to take a look at what it looks like in the game itself. Got my grid box. It says, hey, look, that's a wall. Again, like I said, if you don't like it as far as, what it looks like, whether it's, too small, too big, all of that is in your hands as far as changing anything. And you can change things very fast on the fly. So, it is a good option. So I hope you have enjoyed this basic introduction on how to basically, like get a texture into Unreal using the Substance plugin, how to make a texture, you know, and thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll have some more tutorials made before you know it. All right.